Yeah, it is. It's a function of discipline and rigor too, right? So a lot of times we are so in healthcare, we are so focused on immediate outcomes, so focused on that to ensure that our patient care and continuity of care is there, that oftentimes we don't take the time to sort of slow down, to speed up. I don't mean to say slow down by not paying attention to patient care. I mean, from a strategic standpoint, you really have to carve that piece out. And from a CHR's perspective, super critical, right? This is where you are pulled into firefights every single day. Tommy and I have conversations weekly around these things, but if you're not taking the time to really set the foundation for what you're striving for, then you're going to find yourself spinning your tires. So you've got to do yourself a favor, do your organization a favor, and plan effectively, just to recognize that you've got an opportunity to accelerate by spending the time on that side of the fence.
Yeah, Tommy, anything to add there?
No, I think Brian is spot on. It's really hard, especially if you're in a patient-facing organization, because in those moments it can be life or death, and that feels the most urgent for you to focus on. But there has to be an opportunity, whether it's for the department or the C-suite, really to sort of step back and pull up together and really think about where's the organization going, who's going to row which part of the boat to get there, and how do we do it together, but also the pieces that you have to do separately. But there is a moment where you do have to step away as a leadership team and really set the North Star for where the organization's goals are, so that everyone understands what is most critical, so that the short term, right, then is aligned with what we're focused on. And if it's not life or death, some of those things that can be distractions often can just sort of sit to the side. But to your earlier point, Brian, we do want to check things off. And so some of those things we want to check off are really distractions. And so we have to get really clear on what is our long-term goal, how are we going to get there, and having the right people around us as a team to make sure that we stay focused to achieve those goals.
Thank you so much, Tomya. And this was sort of where we had planned to go a bit with a question. We sort of landed there organically, but planned to go with a question about how you really do this in terms of approaching short-term workforce challenges and staying focused on long-term talent strategy. But I want to spend a little bit more time here really thinking about those short-term workforce challenges, because Tommy, to your point, well, not everything is life and death. Some of this situation with workforce shortages, workforce challenges, it's high stakes. It's very challenging, and it's challenging in the immediate term. So how do you think about, I guess, balancing that, which is like these really high stakes but still short-term issues? You still, like, Tommy, to your point, like you still gotta you gotta be ready for flu season, and flu season is going to be here like that. But then how are you also getting ready for, what's to come long term, especially when you think about, I guess, as Scott Becker often talks about it, as the math problem that healthcare is facing in terms of rising demand for care. That's going to keep going up, and it doesn't seem like we're going to have the people to match that demand. That's a big long-term problem. Stakes are high for both. I guess my question, the long story short, Tommy, how do you do it? How do you balance that as a CHRO?
Yeah, so I think, Brian, it goes back to not about the data fatigue, but it's about data usage, right? So are you using the data that's at your disposal to understand where are those patterns? So we know, well, poor flu season, we're going to use flu season as the continued example, but we know flu season is going to happen. You know that there's certain points in the year that things happen, whether it's June and July when most people are on vacation. It's really being able to understand the things that are business as usual versus those things that are an anomaly, and being able to prepare for business as usual so that when the anomalies happen, it has less of a shock to the system because you've already done the preparation for the other short-term sort of accelerants to the system that we know are always going to be there. And so there's that piece of it. And then the long-term part is really aligning to the strategy. So it goes back to our earlier parts of the conversation, is that if HR is at the table having the conversation with the business owners around where the business is going, the long-term connection happens organically, and everything becomes less of an short-term sort of fire drill, because you understand what the North Star is and how you're connecting to that point. But again, it's being able to balance also your strategies on whether you're going to build the talent, buy the talent, borrow the talent. How do you leverage partners like an AMN Healthcare to help you in those particular spaces where you know that your short-term needs would be better addressed by a borrow strategy than it would be, a build or buy in those moments. So it's really being sophisticated about how you use the data, understanding what your long-term goal is so that those short-term moments of fire drills that happen, you can distinguish between what's business as usual sort of flares and what are the things that really do require everyone pivoting and having to address.
Yeah, and there's a menu of solutions here, but the right recipe, I guess, for success is going to vary from organization to organization too. There seems to be, you've got to really know yourself, I guess, as an organization, right? Am I reading that right, to make the right choices?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What I would add, and that was well said, Tommy, what I would also add is that there are things that are consistent across every organization and sort of almost the table stakes around the function of that CHRO or HR organization, and things like retention come to mind. That's an easy one to sort of expound on. If we're not doing the due diligence to ensure that we're mitigating the turnover, we all know the costly implications there, right? So that is a function that has to continue. We have to continue to build that up and ensure that we're doing what needs to be done from an X's and O's standpoint to ensure that we're stopping that downward trend if that's the direction we're heading. Same time, you're planning for the future. How do you build that up? How do you top grade your talent? How are you doing these things to continue to educate and elevate the current staff so that retention then eventually becomes more of a mitigation? So it's those types of things. Foundational principles of the HR function remain. I think those are critical. Those won't go away. Those are super, super important things to every system, every organization. But the next iteration, right? As I mentioned earlier on, it's a tough spot for this teams to be in because we're asking two things of them. We're asking for the fundamental foundational aspects of HR. But now it's time to plan. Now it's time to be a strategist. And that's the complicated dynamics of the conversation.
And the strategist part, that's where there's more, I guess, probably nuance or difference from organization to organization, right, Brian?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's right. That's where you have to get entrenched in what you're striving for. And until you really understand that fundamentally direction you're heading or what your ambitions are, then you're not going to become a strategist that you want to aspire to be. You've really got to be at that table, as Tommy said, to have those conversations and be a part of that long-term planning, to ensure that you've got the right vision and you've got the buy-in from your peer group, the C-suite, to ensure that you're directionally heading, rowing the boat with the rest of them.